Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our program this evening. My name is Stephen Boyd, and I'm the Dean of Enrollment Management and Student Life here at HJI International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership. I'm here to welcome you, actually in the place of Dr. Thomas Walsh, President of HJI, who unfortunately is not feeling well this evening and will not be with us. So we send our best wishes for a quick recovery to Dr. Walsh. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us this evening. We have a very interesting program, and HJI is pleased to be able to co-sponsor this event tonight, together with the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought. I've had the privilege of serving on the board in the past of the Research Institute, and HJI has co-sponsored other events, significant events, together with the Research Institute. Tonight we have a very exciting program, and of course we're hoping that it will stimulate you to enlighten you, also to ask questions about this topic, and hopefully to learn more about HJI and the Research Institute. During the course of the program, I will be putting my contact information into the chat box in case you'd like to learn more about HJI's program of studies, and even if you'd like to think about applying to a degree program, I'll provide those links in the chat box for your convenience tonight. So again, thank you so much for being with us. At this point, I'd like to turn the program over to Dr. Claude Perrotet, who is professor here at HJI and also president of the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought. Dr. Perrotet is a respected member of the faculty here and well known in this field. So thank you, Dr. Perrotet. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dean Boyd. I want to begin by thanking Dr. Thomas Walsh, who unfortunately is ill with the flu. I discovered that when I came online just now. I regret that because the Institute, the Research Institute, owes quite a lot to Dr. Walsh for his institutional support and also his personal support to our Institute. And I'm not here to introduce the Institute. I will just briefly say that it was founded in 1999, and it has the same founders as HJI, Dr. Sun Myung Moon and his wife, Dr. Hak Jahan. And its purpose is very challenging because it is to integrate world thought. Now, sometimes you can get people to work together, even people with totally different opinions. They dislike everything about the other person's viewpoints, but they work together for something that they think is good, where they agree. We have to do that together. But getting two people, especially two academics, to agree on anything is next to impossible. But that is, in essence, the purpose of our institute. Integrating means bringing together two things, two thoughts, two systems of thought, bring them together, but each one keeps its own identity. Now, this time, we have the privilege to have Ambassador Mario Lopez de Leon, who will make a presentation on SDG 4. SDG, for those not involved with the United Nations, means Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them. The fourth one is quality education, in short. And I will introduce the ambassador now. Just give me a moment. So I believe that the full bio will be posted or is already posted in the chat. Our speaker tonight has a very, very long list of achievements, so it's impossible to say everything. Ambassador Mario de Leon is a retired career diplomat with more than 3 decades of service in the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs, specializing in multilateral diplomacy, consular leadership, international development, and policy management. So he has served in senior leadership positions, both in Manila, the capital, and the government, and across key diplomatic posts in the United Nations, Europe, Africa, and the United States. So, among others, and I will skip the dates, Consul General in New York, Ambassador to South Africa, and concurrently to 8 other Southern African nations, Consul General in London, and earlier postings in New York, San Francisco, and the Philippine mission to the UN. He has served as a lecturer at the Foreign Service Institute and examiner for the Board of Foreign Service Examinations. Ambassador DeLeon holds a BA in social psychology with an honorable mention from Ateneo de Manila University, and he completed executive programs in economic diplomacy at the Asian Institute of Management and US public policy and governance at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He was a senior auditor at Hunter College's Roosevelt School of Public Policy. At the United Nations, he served as advisor to the president of the NPT Review. NPT is a Non-Proliferation Treaty Conference, rapporteur of the United Nations General Assembly Third Committee, and alternate vice chair of the UN Committee on NGOs, which is very relevant. And in the private sector, among many other things, the ambassador is the chief strategy officer of STEM-Ed Philippines. And I will end with my introduction by clarifying for those among you who might not know that STEM has nothing to do with the stems of a plant or with stem cells, but everything to do with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's a common term in education. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perotet, for that very kind introduction. And I would also like to thank Dean Stephen Boyd for taking the place of Dr. Thomas Walsh for introducing, or at least being the host of this particular webinar. Well, I'm really very happy to be a part of this and to be a main presenter. So could I just share my presentation so that we could start on time?
Sure.
Okay, so the title of my presentation is more on SDG 4. I renamed it as a global overview and, of course, pathways towards 2030, but I will look at the global status, the regional trends, and acceleration pathways. You know, I'm drawing most of my observations, and I would say even analysis, from my attendance at the high-level political forum recently held at the United Nations in 2025, and also my experience with regional SDG platforms. And I'm talking about the Economic and Social Commissions, particularly of Asia and the Pacific, or ESCOP. Now, please note, the official title of SDG 4 is Ensure Inclusive and Equitable Quality Education and Promote Lifelong Learning Opportunities for All. So that means it talks about inclusivity, equity, quality, and at the same time, sustainability. So we will look at the global status, regional patterns. I'm also introducing STEM readiness, digital device, which is part of what I do right now, and the role of certain interventions on how we could accelerate SDG 4. Then I will conclude with practical pathways, and we can take it from there. Now, the global status of SDG 4 in 2025. Based on HLPF, that is the High Level Political Forum 2025, SDG 4 remains significantly off track globally. Learning poverty, which is defined as the percentage of children who cannot read and understand simple text by age 10, that's the definition, is about 70% in low and middle income regions. And the global recovery from the pandemic remains incomplete. And if you look merely at the low income regions, it's above 70%. So I would say that the STEM competency levels, particularly in mathematics and basic scientific reasoning, remain below national curriculum expectations in many countries, particularly according to recent PISA, or the Program for International Student Assessment results. Teacher shortages persist across every region, especially in physics, chemistry, and higher level mathematics. And lastly, financing is another major barrier. Only a small number of countries allocate the recommended 4 to 6% of GDP to education as recommended when the SDGs were adopted in 2015. In fact, based on the recent HLPF, the donor countries have only contributed 45% of their SDG targets going towards 2030. So it's already been 10 years and it's only 45%. And per the UNESCO's latest report, ODA accounted for only 17% of the 97 billion annual funding gap. That's the funding gap for SDG 4. So these structural weaknesses contribute to ever-widening inequities and definitely slow SDG progress. At the HLPF 2025, SDG was not reviewed in depth, yet it dominated cross-sector discussions. Education emerged as a foundational determinant of progress across health, gender equality, decent work, and also partnership. For example, SDG 3 on health highlighted that health literacy, vaccination uptake, and community resilience are strongly linked to educational levels. SDG 5 underscored the persistent gender gap in STEM fields, and SDG 8 on decent work stressed the deepening skills mismatch as economies transition to digital and green jobs. Now, there are priority acceleration pathways that have emerged. First, foundational learning, which is actually defined as basic literacy, meaning that anyone who has reached the age 10 can read and comprehend simple text. Basic numeracy, which means that they understand and can apply arithmetic, and socio-emotional skills. Recovery is essential for that. Second, teachers must be repositioned as catalysts of transformation through quality training, especially in STEM, and also digital pedagogy. Third, digital public infrastructure, including connectivity, satellite broadband, and even AI-enabled tools, must be scaled to reach underserved and/or marginalized communities. Fourth, financing reforms and stronger partnerships, as called for by SDG 17, which is, of course, about partnerships, are needed to sustain systemic improvement. So let me go now to a regional context overview. Regional trends in Africa, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, and OECD. As you know, Africa faces the most severe learning poverty and teacher shortages. Asia Pacific shows extreme disparities between urban centers and remote indigenous communities, as well as island communities. The Middle East struggles with, and the Caribbean, and Africa struggles with education disruptions, partly due to conflict and displacement. Latin America continues to experience the deepest learning setbacks from the pandemic, and OECD have their own issues, but it's all about declining math and reading scores based on PISA results, teacher burnout, and mental health concerns among the youth. So here is a graph that illustrates learning poverty across the 5 regions. As you can see, Africa and Latin America show some of the highest rate, while OECD countries remain relatively low but still facing setbacks. Asia Pacific sits in the middle, but this does not capture the tremendous variation within the region, which I mentioned earlier, particularly the deep inequities faced by marginal communities in the Pacific Islands, remote mountainous regions of South Asia, and the archipelagic countries in ASEAN, particularly what they call the Bimpiaga or the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, least developed areas. So the big takeaway here is that learning poverty is both a global and regional problem requiring localized interventions. Now let me go now to STEM proficiency across regions. STEM proficiency is a major determinant of long-term competitiveness in youth employment. As we all know, with STEM proficiency, countries reach higher levels of economic growth. The data here in this graph shows that proficiency gaps persist across all regions, with the sharpest deficits in Africa, as you can see, Latin America, and segments of Asia and the Pacific. For context, some rural junior high schools, even in Southeast Asia, do not offer physics or chemistry due to lack of qualified teachers. Improving STEM readiness is therefore a central requirement for SDG success and aligns with national workforce agendas I've heard during HLPF. Financing gaps in education. This graph highlights the financing gaps relative to the UNESCO benchmarks. Many low and middle income regions fall below the minimum threshold. This directly affects the availability of trained teachers, adequate facilities, learning materials, and digital infrastructure. For many of these LMICs, expanding access to alternative financing, including philanthropy, blended finance, and private sector partnerships, will be essential if they're able to sustain long-term educational transformation. Now let's go to STEM teacher shortages. Teacher shortages remain one of the most binding constraints for SDG 4. In several regions, particularly Africa, as you can see, up to 45% of needed STEM teachers are absent from the system. And this is more than a recruitment issue. It's a deployment, training, and retention issue. For it's hard to find teachers in what you call underserved areas. In those areas, even where schools exist, they often lack teachers capable of delivering advanced math and science. That's how the problem is. So addressing this constraint requires reforms in teacher pathways, incentives, and continuous professional development. Now let's go to the so-called digital divide. This is an overview. We all know that meaningful connectivity is now foundational to SDG 4. This was discussed widely during the HLPF 2025. The digital divide graph shows the proportion of learners without reliable access to the internet or digital tools. As expected, the divide is widest in Africa, parts of Asia and the Pacific region, especially again, as I've described, rural or indigenous communities in archipelagic countries. And this is where satellite broadband, such as my personal experience with our project in Mindanao, in the Bimpiaga region, demonstrates strong potential for sub-regional replication, which I will just elaborate shortly. You know, ASEAN, I'll try to focus now on, since I talk about the regional differences, about ASEAN and the Bimpiaga integration. You know, ASEAN is one of the fastest growing regions in the world, but it has an area which we call the Bimpiaga area, which is the least developed areas of four countries, as I mentioned, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And most of these countries are actually archipelagic, meaning they're island economies. ASEAN's education strategies emphasize digital readiness, TVET, or what you call technical and vocational education and training, and also skills mobility. But Bimpiaga focuses on reducing geographic inequities, particularly in remote and island communities. Our BKCF Mindanao demonstration model represents a viable blueprint, I would say, and this is our own contribution to how we could possibly achieve SDG 4 in an accelerated manner, combining satellite broadband, STEM integration, localized content, and partnerships with the Department of Education, local government units, NGOs, and private sector actors. Scaling this model across the sub-region could substantially improve SDG 4 outcomes. And I'm talking about Bimpiaga here. And we have had initial talks already with Malaysia, particularly in Sabah, and also with Indonesia when it comes to Kalimantan. Now, I just want to say that four main challenges remain. As I mentioned earlier, we have focused a lot on the diagnosis of why SDG 4 is not moving forward. Foundational gaps are persistent. I mentioned that earlier. Teachers shortages, particularly in STEM, are critical. Financing is insufficient. And digital divides exclude the most vulnerable. At this particular point, you know, one of the things that I just want to say about myself is, you know, I'm a diplomat. I've been involved a lot with policy and, of course, articulating national positions in multilateral agencies and also bilaterally. But when it comes to SDGs, for instance, which is actually an impact to society, I think we all know the problems, but what do we do about it? So I want to talk at this point, based on my experience in the past on development, particularly with the likes of the World Bank, the UNDP, and also the Overseas Economic Cooperation Fund of Japan. I'd like to introduce this intervention, what we call monitoring and evaluation and the theory of change. You know, this slide describes how inputs translates to outputs, outcomes, and long-term impact. Taken together, you know, this theory of change emerges not merely as a technical planning and monitoring tool, but a strategic policy and political asset. Strong monitoring and evaluation systems ensure that interventions, whatever they are, remain evidence-based and adaptable, consistent with the theme of HLPF 2025. The theory of chains also helps stakeholders articulate the logic behind interventions, such as how connectivity enables access to education, how access supports STEM learning because you have broadband, and how improved learning supports human capital. And consequently, of course, you will have economic development. For ASEAN and the BIMPIAGA, aligning projects to a shared theory of change strengthens accountability, sustainability, and enables cross-border learning, or what I call replication. Now, I just want to point out an illustration of the theory of change as we adapted it to our project in BIMPIAGA, which we call the Enabling Immediate Wireless Connectivity to Underserved Areas. The inputs, which are the activities, are actually providing connectivity, STEM modules, ALS integration, that is alternative learning systems, because we wanted also the adjacent community to be part of the benefit, and of course, training the teachers. Now, with these inputs, you'll have these outputs, Because of connectivity, you have improved access, and because you have STEM modules, you have STEM competence, and of course, you will have overall digital readiness. Now, when it comes to outcomes, we talk about what will be the benefit to the stakeholders. So it will be higher participation, and that means more students will be ignited to have interest in learning, and this will be good also for the schools. Better learning, of course, that is good for the teachers because they become more effective, and at the same time, also the students. And STEM pathways, that is primarily for the students so that they can pursue degrees that will give them, very good job opportunities in the future. And the impact to society is, of course, human capital growth, reduce inequity, and SDG for acceleration. So at this point, I just want to talk about the pathways forward for SDG 4. After talking about M&E and the theory of change, I would say that we should strengthen monitoring and evaluation systems because this is where we get the data. This is where everything becomes evidence-based. Apply a clear theory of change for planning, meaning you just don't plan. You have a way of moving forward wherein you have outputs, you have identified what will be the outcome for the stakeholders, and at the same time, what will be the impact for society as a whole. Then we have to invest in STEM teacher development, expand connectivity and digital learning tools. A lot have been going into that. And I just want to add, many have been talking about AI, but not unless you have connectivity. You cannot use AI, right? So AI can only happen when you have digital public infrastructure. And of course, I just want to go back again to what I said. To scale ASEAN and BIMP-IAGA collaboration, we've started in the Philippines. We're showing great promise. We want to work with Malaysia and possibly Indonesia. Now, my final call to action. In closing, SDG is not merely an education target. It is the foundation of national competitiveness, human capital development, and long-term stability. As you all know, the window to 2030 is narrowing, but the tools, evidence, and partnerships do exist that can accelerate progress. 。 . 。  . 。 . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . 。 . . 。 。 . . 。 . . 。 . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . . 。 . .
。 . . . . 。 .
. The- Through targeted investments, strong monitoring systems, and regional collaboration, we can transform the lives of millions of learners, especially those at the margins. So we now have an opportunity to demonstrate global leadership in whatever region we belong to as far as SDG 4 is concerned. Thank you, and as we say in the Philippines, maraming salamat po. I'll be ready for questions, whatever, later on after I think Dr. Ward comes out with his response. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think we will go on. We will move to Dr. Watt's presentation rather quickly before discussing, and then we will discuss both presentations at the same time, especially since they will be very closely connected to each other. I can just say that this was a very fascinating and at the same time, I don't know, almost sad on some points presentation. Not the presentation wasn't sad, but some of the facts, namely that those areas in the world that are developing fastest are also the ones who have least. And it is a challenging for the whole world. It is not just a challenging for them, but also for us. Another observation I made is that even OECD countries have their problems. You could say it's the rich people's problems, but mental health, things like that. Yeah, and even I forgot which one of the slides showed that even OECD only achieved 70%, which is means even those countries that are considered the developed ones are not developed, at least from a perspective of a perfect standard. They are not where they should be. So it's we all have to improve. Anyway, at this point, I will introduce Dr. Ward, who will offer his response. And very briefly, Dr. Ward is a professor of peace and development studies at HJI. And I may add, he's also former president of the graduate school. Prior to that, he served for 18 years as Dean of the College of Public and International Affairs at the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, where he worked closely with former United Nations General Assembly President Stoyan Ganev from Bulgaria and former US Ambassador Philip V. Sanchez of the United States. In 2008, Ward was appointed by Connecticut's Commissioner of Higher Education to the state's Advisory Committee on International Education Policy and served in that role from until 2011. Ward began his career in international banking and worked as a political and economic risk analyst with a special focus on Latin America. He later worked in Latin America with Causa International, an organization founded by Father and Mother Moon Han. And Thomas Ward has been involved in the Research Institute since its founding as president for about 10 years. He has researched, written, and taught courses on the political economy of development for 3 decades. And Dr. Ward, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perote. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your very fine presentation. One thing that I didn't have a chance to mention to you while we had a chance to converse with Dr. Perote before our meeting is that I have a very personal relationship and appreciation for the Philippines. Actually, I was lucky enough to complete my doctorate at De La Salle University back in the 1980s. I know that's one of your arrival of Ateneo, but anyways, I was very fortunate, and I worked very closely during that time with Brother Andrew Gonzalez, whom, as you probably know, also later served as the Minister of Education of the Philippines. So anyway, my connection to the Philippines is a very deep one. And I did write my doctoral thesis on the topic of development, actually, models of socioeconomic development and their educational implications towards a Filipino synthesis. That's the title. I still remember it. So anyway, I really have a deep appreciation for the Philippines is a remarkable place. You have a special relationship with the United States. You have a special relationship with Latin America. Most people probably don't know, but actually for over a century, the Philippines was actually a part of Latin America. It was under the Vice Regency of Mexico. So just an amazing relationship between Latin America and the Philippines. And you have a deep understanding, let's say, of the whole circumstances of the developing world. But as an East Asian country, you also have a deep appreciation of the specific nuances which have allowed really East Asia to take off and become an economic powerhouse. And I know that in recent decades, the Philippines is also starting to do that as well. And so it's a remarkable place, and I think really can be an incredible bridge wherever you go. I was glad to hear about the time you spent in Africa, because I think the Philippine experience is a unique experience and a recent experience, I think, which many countries can be able to benefit and learn from. So I just wanted to begin by making those comments, first of all, and express my deep appreciation to your country and the time that I was able to spend there. So let me share my slides, and I'm going to just jump into my presentation here, if I can. Okay. So first of all, I really liked this particular slide, Mr. Ambassador, and I specifically so much appreciated that in this slide you spoke about the importance of STEM modules, STEM competencies, and STEM pathways, because these are things that I think even in the West we have not paid enough attention to. And we have oftentimes become involved in other topics and more like social topics, rather than dealing with the fundamental fact that in order for a developed country to remain competitive, and in order for the developing world to become prosperous, the development of these competencies is absolutely core to everything else. And as Dr. Perrottet mentioned, but I thought I'd also just make a slide, STEM relates to science, technology, engineering, and math. Anybody who is in education, you're constantly hearing about STEM, STEM, STEM. And there's no question that international organizations and governments around the world, including the United States, pay special attention to trying to foster competencies in these particular domains. The Sustainable Development Goal number 4, we've already covered it several times, but I'm just going to read it again here. Sustainable Development Goal 4 is a commitment to ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong opportunities for all. It doesn't quite have that same crystallized focus upon STEM, but I think it's there. You know, if we read between the lines, it's there as well. It's quite clear, as we've already heard from our ambassador, the challenges persist in terms of education. If you look at the case, for example, 109 million children are in school today, more than back in 2015. But there are still some 272 million children around the world who are not in school at all. And that was as recently as 2023. So we obviously have a way to go. In 1994, when I first began really to get an interest in this field, one of the key things that I learned first and foremost was that the reason for the very significant differences in development in Latin America versus the developments that were occurring even in the ASEAN region was the fact that the scale of education was not very high in Latin America, as you can see from these charts. The average Brazilian in 1994 was only getting 6 years of education. And same for Honduras, the same for Guatemala. However, by 2025, there has been a significant improvement in education in so many of the Brazilian companies. And that's why more and more you can see that there are all kinds of developments that are beginning to occur in Latin America in fields such everything from software development, to tool technology. All types of things are beginning to develop in Latin America because you have a more educated group. However, even in those cases, we're talking about learning adjusted years. Education, one thing we have to keep in mind in a place like Latin America, for example, is education, it doesn't work the way that it works here in the United States. So many of the children in places like Latin America, they have to work during the day, as Dean Boyd knows well. They have to work during the day, and they only can go to school at night for a few hours, And the other tragedy is that the professors who come in, they come in after a day of work, and they teach for a few hours in these schools. How well did they prepare their material? How much are they really equipped to be able to convey to those people what's needed? So again, going back to the ambassador's presentation, this need for teacher training and also people to be dedicated teachers, not that this is something that one does on the side to somehow be able to increase one's monthly income. That's not the best way to go. And I'm not saying that that's what's behind this. Many of these teachers are very sincere and excellent teachers, but the reality is that they face so many challenges. So the quality of education, these are some of the things that impact upon that education. Now, at times, people talk not about just STEM critical competencies, but they also talk about what's referred to as STEAM critical competencies, and they add in there the arts. And when we're talking about the arts, what we're really talking about there is the need to develop both creative and critical thinking skills. These are things that likewise need to be developed. And so a pure focus just on STEM, it sometimes downplays the great importance of language skills, of again, critical thinking and also creativity, which are behind so many of the successes that occur in a society which is able to develop its economy in the way that it would like to do so. So I want to emphasize, and I'm going to come back to that at the conclusion of this presentation, that this is an important piece. And if that piece is ignored, or if it's replaced by something else, which many times is the case, we sometimes don't make the progress that we should be making in these other areas. I mean, I'll just give an example of one of my experiences when I still had my children in grade school, And this is a very common thing, by the way, in the American school system. Those of you who have had your children educated in the American public school system, you're aware of this. I remember going in one day and meeting with one of my son's teachers, and what he said to me was that, that he was teaching a science course. He said, "Oh, we had a very important conversation today on violence. On how do we address the issue of violence? What causes violence? And I couldn't say anything there; it just wouldn't have worked. But in my mind, I was thinking, I thought my son was studying biology here. I don't understand what you mean. What talking about violence? So sometimes quality time, which is needed to develop these competencies, gets diverted into other areas. And so we need, again, to really recognize the fact that curriculum needs are crucial. There has to be a strict curriculum which is in place. I think by the time that we get into university, right, we can recognize pretty clearly, oh, this professor didn't prepare his class. and you don't survive very long if, as a professor, you don't prepare your classes. That's a very, very crucial dimension. But that even is probably much more crucial when we get into the area of elementary education. So on the one hand, people that only dedicate their primary education, that's a part-time task for them in some of the developing world. And on the other hand, sometimes where a social agenda seems to supplant or replace the critical competencies that we need to instill in our youth wherever we are. You know, we can learn a great deal from China, and it was in 1978 that Deng Xiaoping made the decision that he wanted to take politics out of business, and he wanted to take also politics out of education. And he wanted to launch reform and opening up so that China could become rich. That became his focus. He wanted to do that instead. He said, let's put aside all of this politics that we've been involved in so much, particularly he came right after the Cultural Revolution, where the whole country had been torn apart by political divides. At the end of this period, somehow he emerged, and what he emphasized was, now we're going to focus upon becoming successful, becoming an economic powerhouse. And he initiated fundamental transformations in terms of the economy and in terms of the market, even inside of the People's Republic of China. So he chose for STEM instead of politics. And I think that that's an important lesson, because I visited China for the first time in 1984. When I visited there in 1984, there were people that were still people my age talking about how they had lost their education because of the Cultural Revolution. During the time that they should have been going to a trade school or to a university, they were out in the fields, or they were involved in somehow exposing the people that were not sufficiently in sync with the Little Red Book at that time, the Mao's thought at that time. So basically, Deng Xiaoping changed all that. And he emphasized really that he wanted to develop a new generation of educated young people. And that's why we can look at Shanghai today. It's nothing what I saw when I visited there in 1984. It's a model, you know. If you visit the airports in China, I don't think we have any airports in the United States like the incredible airports that are in place in China. But it all really is due to the fact that there was this fundamental transformation that occurred, so that they began to focus upon education on every single level. That became a key. Now, education in the developed and developing world, I think one of the things that also hampers it is the fact that we still do have a lot of politics that's going on instead of emphasizing the importance of STEM learning, preparing people in these areas which allow an economy to be able to develop and go forward. So these outcomes that the ambassador spoke to us about, talking about this crucial dimension, as Ambassador De Leon said, about learner readiness and participation in STEM pathways, having those pathways in place, and the teachers knowing if we want our nation to really become a successful nation, we need to be able to prepare people with the kinds of skills that are going to enable them to participate in the global marketplace as viable and respectable competitors. And that's a way also, I think, if we have this focus, we also have that consequence that Ambassador De Leon spoke about, of reducing education inequity and enhancing human capital in remote communities. So one of the things which I'm a little bit concerned about, I'll be very honest, and I like Dr. Perrottet, I'm also not a diplomat. But one of the things I'm concerned about is that when I look at even the way that some of the international organizations, including UNESCO, for example, deals with the issue of SDG 4, I find in a lot of the language and the blogging there that there's much more politics there than there is focus upon actually preparing a generation that can genuinely compete in the marketplace. And I think that we have to really reflect upon the impact of that and on where we want to go. And I think that that's part of where, again, this STEM competency can benefit from adding on this extra piece of arts and humanities. And I'm not talking about just any arts and humanities, and I know that that may be objectionable to some, but I do feel that we need to look at, likewise, emphasizing values, and particularly really, what occurred in the case of China is that Deng Xiaoping, and I think the Chinese leaders that followed, regardless of what you think about their viewpoints, they were able to imbue in the people of China a sense of national pride. And likewise, they were able to revive it and emphasize the importance of tradition. And also, the family, the intact family, is a very important piece in terms of the overall development of society and the overall success of a society, At the University of Chicago, between 1969 and 2009, there was a longitudinal survey that was conducted. That means that for four decades, they tracked certain types of families, intact two-parent families, intact families that had remarried, families where there was only one spouse, unmarried families. They looked at all these different models, and then they looked at certain kinds of social trends. Which types of families have the largest percentage of their children that are able to graduate from university? Well, it was the ones that have intact two-parent families. The same was true in terms of success with regard to which children get the most A's in school. It was the same. And likewise, which families have the least amount of juvenile delinquency? The same point again. The two-parent intact families are the most successful ones. And also, even the whole matter about assaults and crimes, which families have the least number of children that get involved in those types of activities? And the same thing, it was the two-parent families which were the most successful in all those areas. There's a professor at Harvard University, his name is Robert Sampson, and he has done a study of neighborhoods. And what he has found is that the most successful neighborhoods are neighborhoods where there is a large percentage of two-parent intact families. He says that when you're going to go and buy a house, don't go out and just try to see, well, which economic level is this area. Don't just look at the school system. But one of the most important things that you should look at is what percentage of this neighborhood is a neighborhood which consists of intact two-parent families. He said that's a fundamental formula for success. If you move in a neighborhood like that, there will be less crime, and the children that grow up in those families will be much more successful. And this was a study that goes across all types of races, all types of ethnicities, and all types of income levels. Sampson found this to be a consistent pattern. So I really by the way, Filipino society is an amazing family society. So I think that that's another positive dimension that the Philippines can be able to bring and contribute to this worldwide conversation. And that's why I'm delighted that Ambassador De Leon has put so much time in that. Just one other observation, Ambassador. I think that one of the things that we're going to have to look at going forward is trying to have distance learning modules that are prepared in different languages and accord to the cultural conditions of different parts of the world, that can be able to deal with those issues and that can be able to be used by the teachers in order to be able to educate their students better and also to educate themselves. I think that really it is a great shortcut, and I'm glad that you spoke about the need to address the digital divide, because I think that that's going to be one of the key things that we need to do to be able to improve our teacher corps And also, I think that because of the fact that these would be well organized modules, they also would serve the purpose of making sure that those STEM competencies would be at the forefront. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ward. And again, thank you, Ambassador De Leon. One thing that I meant to say at the very beginning, but did not, and I will catch up at this point, is I owe a debt of gratitude to Mrs. Murali Balan, the director of WFWPI, in other words, Women's Federation for World Peace International's director of UN offices, I believe, in New York, Geneva, and Vienna, who has facilitated the ambassador's presence tonight. So I'm very grateful to her for that. And it is great when we can cooperate. That is a practical example of the need to work together, which is not something very new, but both things that we don't do are things that we know. So sometimes it's good to remind ourselves. At this point, I have a certain number of questions, a few of my own and some from viewers or listeners. But first, maybe I should give the ambassador an opportunity to respond to Dr. Ward, if you wish to. Ambassador De Leon, do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Claude Perrotet. Oh, I definitely agree with Dr. Ward about the need to integrate arts, STEM. As a group in STEM Ed, we started with STEM, but during the course of our pilot project in Mindanao, we really came to the realization that we really need to integrate the arts into it because that's something that attracts quite a number of students as well, particularly when it comes to design. Some if you talk about Tesla, for instance, if you don't have people who are in the design industry or who are very creative, you won't come out with real good design cars, right? You might have
Yes.
a very good electric vehicle, but you need that kind of talent when it comes to industries like this. We're looking into that. So thank you very much, Dr. Ward, for uh, saying that. I was not prepared to talk about it primarily because we have not included it yet in our pilot, but definitely that is in our pipeline. And secondly, I think the need for values, I agree with that. Family has a lot to do with whatever direction a child takes when he goes towards higher education. In the Philippines, that's very strong. Um, so I would say that that is also part of the arts and culture. I would say part of STEAM rather than STEM per se. It takes a village sometimes to come out with real good outcomes for the community and impact to society. So thank you again, Dr. Ward.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador. At this point, I would like to ask questions on behalf of our audience. And let me go to the first. I have also some comments, some congratulations to the ambassador by people who know him or know of him. But I want to go. Okay, first question by Dr. Ronald Brown, who is a faculty member at the HJI. Ambassador, do you find that the USA or China are the most understanding of the situation of countries like the Philippines and other countries of the area.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure that I understand fully.
Yeah, I don't know if it means relationships or diplomatic relations, but if we talk about education, the Philippine education system is patterned after the US. Okay, and so I would say that even the pedagogy of, well, you have to remember the history of the Philippines. One of the greatest contributions of the US to the Philippines was bringing the Thomasites, right? They were the ones who brought English and public education to the Philippines. So I would say that due to our history, the US has a lot of influence, definitely, as far as education is concerned in the Philippines. Now, I'm not so sure about China. We have had trade relations with China even during the time of the Spaniards. Uh, in fact, we have the oldest Chinatown in the world. The oldest Chinatown in the world is in the Philippines. It's called the Parian, which was outside the walled city of Intramuros during the time of the Spaniards. So I would say we have different kinds of relationship with both the U.S. and China. So I'd rather answer it that way, not unless Mr. Ron Brown can further clarify his question.
Yes, maybe he will.
Yes,
will.
I would.
Okay, Dr. Brown, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My question is the Chinese model for economic development is highly centralized, goal-oriented, and it has proven very successful in the case of China, as Dr. Ward pointed out, that it has been very successful. Do you think that this Chinese model of economic and social development would be more appropriate than the American model?
I would answer it personally. I think there should be a mix in the Philippines. During the time of Marcos Sr., the father of our current president, everything was centralized by the government. It worked fine at the start, but abuses came out, particularly because of cronyism, since there was a very strong grip of the central government in anything that deals with economic progress. So what happened is after what we call the People Power Revolution in 1986, we went towards more of the U.S. model of the private sector taking the lead and government just providing an environment of enabling private sector to thrive towards economic progress. So what I'm saying is we had experienced the Chinese approach. I don't know if that is something that may be needed in some sectors of the economy, maybe. But right now, I cannot judge, but we are still pursuing the path that it's the private sector that is driving economic growth. And the role of government is merely to provide an enabling environment for private sector investment.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for clarifying. And let me move on to the next. Briefly, I do not know if you know Dr. Venus Agustin, who is also from the Philippines and vice president or former vice president, I don't know, at Sunmun University, Sonhak University in Korea. He sends you his congratulations. The question is by Magnus Larsson, who is Secretary General of our research institute. Why did India's STEM capacity accelerate faster than the Philippines? despite both countries facing poverty and underdevelopment for much of the 20th century? And what is the replicable core of India's approach?
Well, the answer is simple. Uh, the government, I'm talking about the Philippine government, did not actively, promote, I would say, the science, technology, and engineering to students. Although we had science high schools, we were not able to produce enough engineers, I would say enough scientists. Unlike India, they have a lot of engineers, they have a lot of scientists. That is the reason, in fact, why they are practically cornering the H-1B visas,
Yes,
that is
yes,
catering to Silicon Valley.
yes, yes.
Everybody knows that. I think when it comes to the number of engineers and scientists, I think India beats most of the developing countries. So I think that's the reason why. Not even countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, who are trying to catch up as well, could definitely catch up with India. I mean, that will be my answer.
Uh, just to repeat, Dr. Lawson ends his question with, what is the replicable course? In other words, you think that there's anything that the Philippines could replicate from India that would allow it to catch up
Um,
in time?
my approach is more of what we have been doing. I mean, I'm talking about STEM ed. We believe that you should start igniting the interest of students from primary school to high school to really be interested in science, math, particularly in high school. You can just imagine a student being taught mathematics at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If there are no interventions that make it interesting for them, that's the reason why we came out with adjunct educational tools that would make it attractive, or at least would attract the student to listen to what the teacher is saying. So it requires a lot of teacher training, and at the same time, it attracts a lot of what I would call adjunct educational tools, and definitely providing connectivity is also one of them. So that has always been our approach. We need to increase the pool of people who are in STEM so that we will have more graduates who could compete with countries like India. We will have more in the pool of college students and, of course, future professionals.
Thank you for your response, Ambassador. I will move on quickly because we have actually an avalanche of questions suddenly. One is by somebody you might know, Marie Montebon.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
on the macro level, what structural intervention could be created to mitigate the impact of AI and digital technology on people, young graduates and professionals who will likely be isolated or excluded from the labor economy and industries? And then thank you for your substantial input, Ambassador. So this is about
AI.
mitigating the impact of AI, and I guess not the positive impact.
Yeah, that's right. There are many schools of thought when it comes to AI. There are some, who want the students to use it as a tool, primarily to help them in their studies, right? You can use it for research. You can use it to frame, for instance, certain theorems that you might have. If you use it productively, I think it will be constructed for students to learn AI. The problem that we have is even the teachers are not so familiar with AI. Okay, AI has been already developing leaps and bounds very fast, and it has been overtaking, traditional pedagogy in most of the schools. Right, that's number one. And our approach, one of our biggest intervention is we want definitely to introduce connectivity so that that will be the platform where you can actually experiment with AI. So if teachers, have a handle on how they could teach AI to students, because if you make students maybe anxious about using AI, you might as well tell them that you can make AI your friend, no? Something like that. Particularly when it comes to those that are available, and I'm talking about, of course, Chat GPT, Bing, and of course Gemini. I mean, those are the ones that are
And don't forget
available.
Claude,
Yeah.
the best.
Right. So, well. Anyway, what I'm just saying is that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is we need to regulate it now. But the fact is, regulating something that you still don't know how it will unfold, right? Because we are still in the very early stages of AI, and we don't know how much it will still evolve, right? They're talking about AGI now, artificial general intelligence. I don't even know that. So, me, as far as I'm concerned, I also use AI primarily to frame some difficult questions so that at least it could give me a different perspective. But at the end of the day, I will be the one to make the decision on what I will use, you know. So that's where critical thinking comes in. We need students who have critical thinking, they're creative, who fact check as a matter of course, so that whenever in fact, all of these AI applications, they always have that. It commits mistake, right? They always have the disclaimer. So as long
Yeah.
as, you get these answers, don't get it on face value. You have to think for yourself. I mean, that's my own personal experience with it.
I can testify to the impact of AI on higher education and especially for online courses. It completely changed the pedagogy, especially the evaluation. I use it all the time in the same way as you do, but students can so easily just use it to replace the human brain. And then the human brain doesn't learn. So anyway, will continue with a question from the Netherlands.
Oh, wow.
Mr. Willem Koetsier. Thanks for the informative presentation. From Armenia came the TUMO learning program, which is made up of self-learning activities, workshops, and project tabs around 14 learning targets. Here one learns the STEAM aspect and realizing projects. Would such new education methods be helpful? William Koetsier, Amsterdam. I must admit that I'm not familiar with the TUMO learning program, so I cannot offer any clarification.
Yeah, the same with me. I'm not familiar with it. If I get a chance to understand it,
Yeah, yeah. So
maybe
I
it's
think we can
something that
skip to
we
the
could
next
emulate.
question. Yeah, unless Mr. Koetsier clarifies. This is Priscilla Garces. I hope I don't mispronounce. What policies are being implemented in making sure education in STEM is inclusive and accessible for children and youth with different disabilities or conditions where accommodations like access to assistive tech or software is required for them to fully participate in the learning environment?
That's a very good question because right now we're still evolving, a curriculum that will be really be uh, applicable for STEM in junior high school and in primary school, right? Now, when it comes to making it accessible, because we're talking about the word access here, accessible to those with disabilities. I presume that's what Priscilla is asking, right? Disabilities, right? Maybe once the pedagogy has been created or at least amended to include STEM and responsive to most of the learners, you know, because one of the things that I also learned is many of these young people are digital natives, you know, they they're like fish in the water when they use electronic gadgets, right? So you have to understand that, right? So once maybe that has evolved to an extent, right? That it's I'm not saying it's mainstream, but many are already using it. Then maybe we can come out with more access for those who have disabilities. It will take a little time.
Thank you. Ambassador Dr. Ward wants to say something. So, Dr. Ward.
Just a couple of things just to add on to what the ambassador said. Already so many things are in place with AI which help people with disabilities. For example, you can easily ask AI, instead of having to type things in, if you have a question with mobility of that type, you can just dictate things. You don't have to be you're not required, and you can get a spoken response to your question. Also, I mean, there are different types of learning intelligences, correct? Different ways that people learn. I think that I have not experienced this yet, but I think you could ask AI. I don't understand that so much from this perspective. I'm more a visual person. Can you try to help me? I think that AI is already equipped with a variety of ways to help people with learning disabilities. There's already amazing things that are there. Also, a person that has problems with English language. Can you please explain this to me in Spanish? Immediately they'll switch over to Spanish and explain it to you, or whatever. There are many pieces in place already. So in and of itself, I mean, I don't think we've ever had a tool like this, which is really able so easily to adapt to people with different types of learning disabilities. So it's a very big plus. Already there are certain things that a little bit the ambassador spoke about the idea of things of people that are kind of native born into AI. And likewise, AI somehow within it already there are components that are inborn, so to speak, that actually can help people with disabilities from the beginning as they get to as you interface with AI, as they get to understand, your strengths, your insights, your approach to learning. It can be able to adjust to that. It's an amazing development that's occurring in our lifetimes through AI.
Yeah, just a short reaction. I perfectly agree with that. In fact, even if you don't have laboratories in your school, you can have simulated
There you
laboratories
go.
using AI.
Yeah, we are more and more in a world where virtual means real. I mean, you can do practically real things with virtual. Yeah. We are getting close to the end of our program, which is no 8:15, 8:30. It's now 8:19. And we just happen to have one more question. So I will ask you that question, if I may, Ambassador. It's a question by Dr. Venus Agustin.
Mhm.
And it's about the discussion about China. I'm not quite sure which one, since China came up a few times. I may agree that the Chinese economy obviously is successful based on central control, but there is so-called eco-political marriage wherein its economic model is in tune to its hegemonic political agenda. Meanwhile, the Western economic model is not. How we can, I guess, how can we counter China's economic model? Okay, that requires all your diplomatic tact to answer.
I love to wear my diplomatic hat there.
But you may be
Sometimes
blunted.
as much as possible, I believe this. Many countries usually try to, you know, I think separate the economic relationship with the political relationship. Even in ASEAN, the way they dealt with China, they have a lot of problems with China. They try to divorce it. They might be like Vietnam. Vietnam has been having a very good economic relationship with China, but they have problems at the political sphere, right? So I think some other countries do in Southeast Asia, and they've been doing that. In the Philippines, the problem is China decided to link its political issues with its economic, right? So, in other words, when we had problem politically, they decided not to even allow exports of bananas into China. So they already link it. So it all depends, I think, how China deals with each country. I would say that it's more of a bilateral issue. I mean, I have to speak that way. But we cannot come out with a one size fits all approach to that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kotsia, do you want to clarify your question? Maybe I see that you are there. You may speak if you wish. If you wish, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Maybe a little. It comes from Armenia. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Because you
well,
mentioned tumor, and I have no idea what that is, and the ambassador doesn't know either.
it comes from a couple in Armenia. They saw that people have difficulty to learn because they get the separate topics, but they don't know why they have to learn it or for what purpose. So they make little projects, and then you take the mathematics, the digital tools to realize your project. So it is more like a way to realize a purpose and then integrate all these aspects of knowledge. That is now happening in Holland. It is coming to the libraries especially because it's an education besides the schools, especially for young people who cannot so integrate well in the schools. So they hang in the streets sometimes and they bring them to the libraries, and then they have nice projects, and then they feel, oh, I learn on the way. That is in short the thing, Tumo. But you can find it on the internet.
Yeah, I just found it while you were speaking.
Okay, can I
Thank
just
you very much.
react quickly to that?
Yes,
Now,
please.
that's what you mentioned is something like alternative learning systems, ALS. I mean, that's at least the way we call it in the Philippines, wherein you try to entice out of school youth, to go into the formal school system. And one way of enticing them is using technology. Yeah, because as I mentioned earlier, they tend to be digital natives. And so if you start using technology to entice them to go into the formal school system, that could be an effective way of, approaching them using alternative learning systems.
Thank you. Again, I just said one thing, and I'm not sure if we have just the time to. I have just to throw it in there. Does the ambassador have any comment on target 4.747 of SDG 4, which speaks about education for peace? I can read. Yeah, by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of cultures' contributions to sustainable development. So it's lots of words maybe, but there is a quote to it, meaning that education is not just technical, but maybe a little bit what Dr. Ward mentioned about the role of the family. I mean, education for things that are beyond just science and technology. I just wanted to bring it up. If you don't have anything to add.
I will try to answer that. One of the ways to normalize a conflict area is if you start introducing education. I think in Afghanistan, they had a lot of success there. when young women started entering schools, and that promoted peace for some time. Even in the Philippines, in Mindanao, the Bangsamoro, what we call the BARM, Autonomous Region, when they started focusing more on educating the youth, that actually promoted an atmosphere of peace, longer peace, because at least the children will have something to do and they will be learning a lot of things. So, in other words, education, I think, is a prerequisite for any sustainable peace. I mean, that's the way I look at it. I've seen it in conflict areas or those that are just recovering from a conflict. And I presume that if we could apply that in more countries, then I think that's your answer, right?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Education for sustainable peace.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay, finally, I just a last comment to Dr. Ward. When you said about the fact that in, I think, Brazil or some other South American countries, 13 years or 11 years of schooling doesn't mean the same thing as here, because it means really a few hours late at night where the professor and the student is completely exhausted from the day's work. And obviously, the learning process is not quite as efficient, not just in length, but also in quality. I can say that my first experiences in teaching in higher education was teaching courses at the University of Bridgeport 4 hours straight from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I had the full-time job during the day. My students mostly had a full-time job during the day, a hungry family waiting at home, but they just came from New York City by train, 1 hour and a half, and had no time to eat. One time I asked, who has eaten dinner already? And nobody, not one, not me either. And you can imagine the kind of quality education that everybody received. So even in the United States, we have this divide between those who can and those who can less. So that was just my last comment. I'm very grateful to everybody tonight. It was, I felt personally excited by the conversation, the contributions, and very, very grateful to Ambassador De Leon. This was wonderful, and we hope to meet again. I'm sure we will, and we'll definitely remember your name. Again, thank you to Dr. Ward for his very insightful comments. And thank you to Dean Boyd for introducing us. And thank you for Miss Winter, Youngsoon Winter, who has been making all this possible. And I believe it's time to say goodbye. Good night to everyone. And I wish you very happy holidays, very happy Christmas, and anticipating a glorious New Year 2026. Goodbye and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Perote.
Thank you.
And thank you. Happy holidays as well.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Ambassador.
you,
Maraming
everyone. Thank
salamat.
you, Mr. Ambassador.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Dr. Ward. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Perote.
Dean Boyd.
God
Thank
bless
you.
everyone. Thank you for coming
God
tonight.
bless. Yeah.